It all started on a quiet Saturday morning, the kind where you expect nothing more exciting than mowing the lawn or maybe grabbing coffee with your spouse. But that peace shattered the moment we walked outside and found my wife's convertible gone. Just gone. No note, no explanation. At first, we thought it had been towed, maybe mistakenly by the HOA. But when a neighbor mentioned seeing a certain spoiled HOA teen joyriding through the subdivision like he was in a Fast and Furious movie, our stomachs dropped. This wasn't just any teen, this was the HOA president's kid. The same kid who treated the neighborhood like his personal playground, never faced any consequences, and always had an excuse backed up by his overprotective parents. And sure enough, later that afternoon, we got the call. The car had been found, totaled, completely wrecked in a nearby parking structure. No one was seriously hurt, but the damage was insane. We assumed the teen would at least admit fault. But instead, we got slapped with something no one saw coming. A lawsuit. That's right. He sued us. Claimed emotional distress, unsafe keys left in the vehicle, and a bunch of other twisted claims. What followed was a roller coaster of community drama, legal threats, and a battle that pushed our patience, our wallet, and our trust in people to the limit. And trust me, what we uncovered next turned the whole neighborhood against itself. This wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about justice. The craziest part? We'd barely exchanged words with the HOA president or his family before all this. We weren't exactly close, but we always waved politely at meetings, kept to ourselves, and followed the rules. My wife loved that convertible. It was her dream. Car, a vintage cherry red classic she'd saved up for years to buy. We kept it locked, keys inside the house, never left it unattended. So how the teenager even got into the car was the first mystery that didn't sit right with us. A few neighbors hinted that the kid had been spotted sneaking around other people's driveways before, but no one had proof. And of course, the HOA board, made up mostly of the kid's parents' friends, was quick to dismiss any rumors about their golden boy. It was like the whole neighborhood had been gaslit into silence. But when the lawsuit landed in our mailbox, we knew we couldn't just let this go. The legal papers were packed with lies, claims that we'd left the car running, left the doors open, even suggested we'd encouraged the joyride. We started digging, and the more we looked, the more twisted it got. The kid had a history. Prior accidents that had quietly disappeared. Favors pulled by his parents. One neighbor even told us their ring cam had caught him poking around their backyard. But they were too scared to share it publicly. That's when we realized this wasn't just about our car. This was about the kind of power that only exists when no one dares to speak up. We started talking to more neighbors, quietly at first, just feeling things out. What we found shocked us. Several people had weird experiences involving the HOA, president's kid, damaged mailboxes, missing packages, even one family whose car had been egged after a dispute at a board meeting. But no one had ever filed anything formal. They were either talked out of it, threatened with fines, or simply ignored. It was like the kid had an invisible shield around him, one built from HOA power and parental protection. Meanwhile, our lawyer was stunned that the lawsuit even made it past filing. The teen's attorney was a family friend, of course, and they were pushing hard to paint us as negligent. Insurance got messy too. Since the teen wasn't listed on our policy and technically stole the car, it threw everything into legal limbo. We were being asked to prove we hadn't given permission, while the HOA board sent out an email vaguely suggesting we'd let the kid borrow it. The worst part? The board scheduled a closed-door HOA meeting, and we weren't even invited, despite it being about us. That's when I started to wonder if this went deeper. What if this wasn't just about one spoiled kid? What if the board had more to hide? Then we got a call from a retired board member who'd moved 2 streets over. She said, "You're not crazy. I tried to speak up once. They made my life hell." She had something for us. A folder she never turned in. We met the former board member at a coffee shop across town, neutral ground. She looked around nervously before handing me a manila folder, thick with papers, emails, and handwritten notes. "They buried this," she said. Inside were complaints filed by other residents over the past 3 years. Some were about fines issued without warning, others were accusations of intimidation. But a few directly named the HOA president's son: trespassing, property damage, even harassing a teenage girl down the street. All of it swept under the rug or written off as misunderstandings. One email chain stood out. It was from the HOA president to the rest of the board saying they needed to protect the boy's future and that the last thing we need is legal attention. It was dated just days after the teen wrecked someone else's bike and the family tried to go public. That family moved a month later. No warning, no goodbyes. It was starting to make sense. With the folder in hand, we finally had leverage. But bringing it forward would mean war. Our lawyer warned us, if you go public, expect retaliation. Not just from the kids' parents, but from the board too. They'll drag your name through the mud. And they tried. We started getting anonymous notes in our mailbox. The HOA hit us with random violations, trash cans being out too long, lawn slightly overgrown, even noise complaints that made no sense. Every day brought a new threat, and we knew. Something big had to happen, or this wouldn't stop. When we thought things couldn't get worse, my wife's employer called her into a surprise meeting. They'd received an anonymous tip accusing her of fraudulently using company resources. The claim was baseless, but it was enough to trigger an internal review. That's when it hit us. This wasn't just an HOA feud anymore. Someone was targeting us personally, trying to ruin our lives outside the neighborhood. We didn't have solid proof, but timing and motive both pointed straight back to the HOA board and their golden child. Then, late one night, I caught someone on our security camera. A hooded figure crept onto our driveway, snapping photos of my car, mailbox, even the side of the house. They didn't take anything, didn't break in, just collected evidence. The next day, we got a notice from the HOA claiming unapproved structural changes to our property. Nothing had changed, but they were clearly building a paper trail. That same evening, I got a message request on Facebook from a name I didn't recognize. The profile had no photo, but the message was chilling. "You're not the first to cross them. Be careful what you dig up. People have moved away for less." It wasn't just about the lawsuit anymore. It felt like something bigger was brewing. My son started asking why the neighbors weren't waving anymore. My wife started triple-checking door locks, and I kept thinking, how far were they willing to go to protect a spoiled teen and a crumbling lie? I'd had enough. With the anonymous threats, the fake violations, and my wife's job on the line, I knew we couldn't keep playing defense. So I made copies of everything: the manila folder, the camera footage, the HOA letters, and contacted a local investigative reporter who had covered shady HOA stories in the past. She agreed to meet. When I laid it all out, her eyes lit up. "This isn't just some spoiled teen," she said. "This is a cover-up that could go legal." 3 days later, the story aired. Headlines exploded. HOA president accused of shielding son from lawsuits. Board retaliation against homeowners raises legal questions. The story included the wrecked convertible, the lawsuit against us, the harassment, everything. And it went viral. That night, the teen's parents called a board meeting. But this time, they didn't come out smug. They came out shaking. One of the board members stepped down mid-meeting. Another admitted he'd been pressured into silence. And then, the biggest twist, one neighbor we hadn't talked to before stood up and revealed he was a retired judge. He'd been documenting their behavior for months, waiting for a moment like this. He submitted everything to the state HOA regulatory board. Within a week, the president resigned. The lawsuit against us was quietly dropped. And just when we thought it was over, a letter arrived in our mailbox with a formal apology signed by the board. But no return address. Just one sentence written at the bottom. This isn't over. I held that note in my hand for a long time, reading those 4 words over and over. This isn't over. For a moment, the tension crept back in, but then I realized something had changed. This time, we weren't the ones being backed into a corner. We'd exposed the truth, stood up against the HOA abuse, and showed the whole neighborhood that no one, no matter how entitled, was above accountability. Over the next few weeks, the HOA held emergency elections. New members stepped in, including the neighbor who'd once kept to himself but turned out to be our strongest ally. Rules were reevaluated, transparency improved, and suddenly, the atmosphere in the neighborhood shifted. People who had once looked the other way now waved, smiled, and asked how we were holding up. As for the spoiled teen, his family moved out quietly. No drama, no goodbye, just a moving truck and a bitter silence. The wrecked convertible was scrapped, the lawsuit vanished, and with it, the weight that had hung over our home. Looking back, it wasn't about the car or the board meetings. It was about taking back control when someone tried to use power and privilege to